Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm Tom, and we have officially crossed the halfway point of the year, and I wanted to go ahead and look at what my 10 favorite reads of the year so far are. It's always fun to be able to go back and compare at the end of the year with what was on the list at the halfway point. And this wouldn't be a booktube list if I didn't have at least one honorable mention, and that honorable mention is going to be actually a comic book. So it's not even a novel, but I didn't know exactly where I should put this in on my list. Comparing comics and novels gets really complicated for me, but I had to mention Superman for All Seasons. This is one of my favorite comics I have ever read. I think it is an absolutely fantastic entry point into comics. If you've never read comics, you can just go ahead, buy this one edition. It's not super long, and this tells a complete story that you'll be able to enjoy, and it just gives you a look into Superman. If you're not a big Superman person, or somebody who thinks that Superman is a hard character to relate to, I think this is a story that shows that that's not really true. This is not like the big, most epic Superman stories that's ever been told. It's a lot more grounded, and that's actually what I really enjoyed about the story. There's some really heartbreaking stuff in here, but overall, as far as comic book goes, this is a great entry point into the Man of Steel. And I will say, with the movie coming out, I highly recommend checking this one out. Now, let's go ahead and get into the novels that I read this year. We're going to start here at number 10 with my 10th favorite book being Edge of Tomorrow. This is obviously a very well-known story, and I think it's probably most famous from the Tom Cruise movie with Emily Blunt that happened. I forget exactly. I think it has the same name, but this story has a couple of different titles. I think All You Need Is Kill is another one. There's a manga version of this. This is a very highly acclaimed story that has been not retold, but told in a bunch of different story mediums, and it is one of my earliest reads. I think I read this in January, and obviously I enjoyed it. It's in my top 10 here so far of this list of this year. I don't think it'll probably stay on this list throughout the end of the year, but you never know. I guess I could have a not as good of a second half of the year as I did to the first half. But this is basically the story of the humanity is fighting this alien invasion, and a soldier realizes that when he dies, he keeps living the same day over and over again. If you are familiar with the Tom Cruise movie, it's live, die, repeat, live, die, repeat. And that is the basic story here. I really think that some of the sci-fi elements that are in this story are really great. I do think that there's a love plot that kind of gets brought into the story at some point, and I think that drags the story down a little bit. But because this story is short enough that it doesn't really stay on one element too long, I think it's a good read. And I would actually still really like to check out the manga for this, because I've heard the manga is really good, and I actually never watched that Tom Cruise movie, so maybe I should watch that as well, because I've heard the movie is really good, I've heard the manga is really good, and that maybe the novel is actually the worst version of that story. So that is number 10. Now, moving on to the number 9 spot, this is one of my most recent reads, and that is Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruocchio. This is book 1 of the Sun Eater series, and this is a series that I am so excited to get back into. There were so many elements about this book that just worked for me, that clicked in so many different ways, and this is really just laying the groundwork for the series. There's so much that I know is going to be left for us to explore as I continue on into this story, and just this is really like the backstory of Hadrian Marlowe, how he gets to be, well, I guess technically the whole story is, right, because from my understanding, the whole story is kind of told from the perspective of him way later on in life, after you already know everything he's kind of accomplished. But this is really some of those early formative years that happen. This is definitely not a perfect book. I did have some problems with it. I think it slowed down in some places, but obviously number 9 on the list, and a series that I am so excited to get into. I know I'm probably one of the last people to get onto the Sun Eater bandwagon, and that's okay, because I bought these books like when they were coming out. So I always like to say I'm a Sun Eater fan from the beginning. I just haven't read them yet, because I think I bought book 3 when book 3 came out. So that's kind of like when I heard about the series, when book 3 is coming out. So, if I want to be a little bit of a hipster, that's kind of what I use to get my little bit of street cred there. But I am going to be continuing that series in the month of July. So hopefully Howling Dark is just as big of a hit, if not bigger. I've heard that pretty much if you like book 1, you're going to enjoy book 2, 3, 4, 5 even more as you go on through the series. So very much looking forward to that. And obviously being at the number 9 spot here on my list is not the worst place for Empire of Silence to be. Now, from the beginning of a series to the end of a series, and that would be The Lonesome Crown by Brian Lee Durfee. This is the final book in the 5 War Angels trilogy, and man, this is a very dark book. So much dark and gruesome stuff happens in this. I actually have a friend who's currently like at the tail end of finishing this book, and he has been messaging me talking about how he's just going to read kids' books after he is done with this, because man, some really dark and brutal, gritty stuff happens. And that's kind of the name of the game for this series. I really enjoyed this series as a whole. It's probably a top 10 fantasy series for me all time. If you're into grim, dark fantasy with like a hint of Game of Thrones and modern fantasy with classic stuff mixed in, just like that whole hero's journey kind of story, but with that elements being played with. I really think that the Lonesome Crown and the Five Warrior Angels trilogy is a series you should absolutely look up. And one thing I really am always going to remember about this book is that, like, legitimately, like the last 2 pages are some of my favorite from the entire story, and I think it just closed the story in a great way. It's not a series that feels like every single loose end is tied off 100%, but the story ends in a very satisfying way. I was so happy with the conclusion to the series, which is always something you've got to worry about, right? It's so hard for series to end perfectly for so many people, and I really think that The Lonesome Crown was a fantastic ending to the Five Warrior Angels trilogy. Now we get to talk about I believe this was the first thing that I read this year, which is awesome to see that it has the staying power to stay here at number 6 on my list, and that is Foster by Clara Keegan. This is a super short story. It's a very powerful story, a very beautiful story about a little girl who really just needs love. Basically, she is going to stay with some people. I believe it's just the summer, but basically her family, her mom is having another child, and they kind of need somebody to watch her as as the family gets ready for this newborn baby. And you really just see that, like, how much love and some affection can really affect a child, and just how much it can mean to somebody who maybe hasn't had enough of it. And it's just one of those stories that, touched me, and it was just really beautiful. Clara Keegan is an Irish author, and I'm going to Ireland later this year, so I'm looking forward to maybe finding some of her books in some bookstores while I'm over there, and maybe picking up a real edition and not my fun little cover myself here. But this is, again, a very short story. I believe it's under 100 pages. It might be like 85 pages or something. So it's definitely one that I highly recommend that you check out if it sounds interesting for you. It's not a huge time commitment, and that is definitely something that makes it pretty easy to recommend. And it's definitely heartwarming. It's not a sad story. I mean, there are definitely some, like, you could say, sad elements to it, but for me, I found it to be a much more heartwarming story of just like love and affection and everything like that. So Clara Keegan, I'm going to read some more from her. Maybe I'll try to read something in the month I'm going to Ireland from her, because she is an Irish author. Now let's get back to some fantasy reads here in the number 6 spot, and that is Tears of the Fallen by Chance Dillon, fellow booktuber here. This was an awesome book. This is actually the second most recent book I have finished, and I had such a good time with this. This book isn't even out yet, so this is definitely an early copy. Chance sent me an early copy of it. I think it comes out July 20th or 21st. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it's the 20th, but this is an awesome world. It has everything you really could want in a fantasy story. You have amazing characters, an interesting plot, interesting magic system, an interesting world, just everything about it. There's so many elements to it that I really enjoyed. And it's not necessarily a story that's going to hold your hand all the way through it. It definitely has that element of a little bit of a Malazan in it. I know Elden Ring was like a huge influence where you're kind of just thrust into this world and you're going to figure it out. You're going to get answers, and all of this, things are going to kind of be told to you more or less. But in general, you just kind of are along for the ride. And I know for some people that works, and for some people that doesn't. It has worked for me very well here in this story, and in some other stories not as well. So, mixed bag even for myself. But I immensely enjoyed Mercy Tears of the Fallen here, and I'm very much looking forward to getting more to it. Chance is doing some giveaways right now if you're watching this before the book comes out, so you can definitely try to get a copy of it early. But I definitely just highly recommend keeping an eye out for it when it does release later here in July. Now that brings us to the top 5, and this is currently one of my favorite authors. This is the only book I have read from her this year, and I'm remedying that very, very soon. But that would be Jenny Wirtz with Fugitive Prince. This is book 4 in the Wars of Light and Shadow series. And man, what an emotionally stimulating book. And this is a series that you want to talk about characters. I absolutely love so many characters. You want to talk about world building. It has such amazing world building, and people have not given the series the appreciation that it deserves. And I'm glad to see it on BookTube. It's slowly getting that appreciation. More and more people are reading it because people keep talking about it, and I'm glad I can be one of those people who keep talking about it. Obviously, I'm not going to say too much. Book 4 of a big series, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there are definitely some huge emotionally impactful moments in here. I talk about this book as being this just steady level the whole way across it. There's no lulls in the story at any point. It's just at a super high level the entire time, where if you were familiar with the series, book 3 / maybe 2, depending on how you read it, right? I read them as two individual books, but Warhost of Vastmark, there's some like these massive peaks in it, and this is just like that steady line. So depending on what you like as a reader, I can definitely see which one you would like more. But Fugitive Prince to me is just like stunning. It's such an amazing book, and I'm super excited to get back to reading some Jenny Words here very soon. And if you have not picked up the Wars of Light and Shadow series, I highly recommend that you do. It's not going to be for everybody. You definitely, honestly, probably read The Gallant first. It's a short story that you can get, and that's going to give you probably a better taste for Janey's writing and just the way she tells the story, better than jumping into Curse of the Mistwraiths, which is book one. That's probably a better entry point for you to give it a try and see what else. And then she has plenty of other standalones that are different from Wars of Light and Shadow. But if you want to check out that world specifically, I would say go ahead, start with The Gallant, see what the writing is all about. And if not, check out To Ride Hell's Chasm or The Master of White Storm, some of her other stuff. And then obviously a lot of people have probably read her works with Raymond E. Feist. But man, this was such a good book, and I cannot wait to get back to the series. Coming in at the number 4 spot is book 2 of the Five Warrior Angels trilogy. So 2 entries here. Yes, I do not exclude authors just because they're on the list more than once. If you write a great book, it ends up here, and that is The Blackest Heart by Brian Lee Durfee. Like I said, book 2 of the Five Warrior Angels trilogy. This has probably the most epic, my favorite battle of all time in it, which is a big thing to say as somebody who's read a whole lot of sci-fi and fantasy with big battles and everything. But there's a battle that happens at the end of this book that I think is just going to stick with me forever. It's done in such a creative way, and in a way that maybe it doesn't make sense in the real world. But who cares? I'm not here for it to make sense in the real world. I'm here for just like this big epic battle of just gnarliness. And that's really the best thing that I can say about it. This series has some of those moments where you just are like, wow, that's not something I'm ever going to forget. Like there's a moment in book 1 that I'm thinking of right now that revolves a box. I'll never forget that. The battle at the end of book 2 here, I'll never forget. And there's a bunch of moments actually in the last book that I will never forget. But the one, there's something that happens with a tree at some point that, yeah, I don't think I'll forget that one anytime soon. So if I need to sell you more on the Five Warrior Angels trilogy, I don't know how I can. Book 1, The Forgetting Moon, was my favorite fantasy book from last year. These 2 are in my top 10 right now, top 10 all-time series for me. I don't know, check it out if you're into something that's a little bit dark and gritty. Now, switching genres just a little bit, we are going to go back to sci-fi and talk about She Who Has Never Known Men. This was a fantastic book. I believe I heard about this from Joanna over at Joanna Reads, and I'm so glad that I read this book. And it is one of those books that it's not going to give you the most satisfying ending. I'm just going to be honest. There are going to be a lot of people who get to the ending of this book and are just frustrated. And that's okay. That's not something that happened for me. I think the ending of this book worked perfectly. It's not a book where you're going to get a whole lot of answers, but it is fantastically written. I think it's a really interesting examination of human perseverance and just that drive and curiosity that humanity seems to have. And there's a lot going on here. The basic premise of the story is that you are following a girl who her entire life, she has just been in a cage with, 39 other women. There's guards. They have everything they need. They have food, water, like everything they are taken care of. But they're in this cage and they don't know why. And they're surrounded by guards and they have no idea what exactly is going on. And the story really progresses from there. I don't want to say any more than that because I feel like it spoils the story and the setup of the story a little bit. It doesn't take too long to get into it. This is another shorter book, but it's absolutely fantastic. Obviously here in 3rd place at the halfway point, and it is one of those books another one that is probably just going to stick with me for a very long time. Now, if you have been here around the channel for a little while, you're going to know what my next 2 books are. You might not know the order, but I think if you have been watching my videos, you know that in the number 2 spot, this was a book that I read early on in the year, but that is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kilwer. This book was just such a blast. This book is one of the only books that has ever actually kind of scared me. I can remember I would be reading this at night in bed, and I would just be in the dark and be like, did I just see something? Is something happening in the corner? Or I walk a lot when I read or listen to my audiobook, and I'd be walking in my hallway and I would kind of glimpse myself in my own mirror that I walk by hundreds of times every day. And I'd be like, what was that? And so that is just the kind of fun, scary story that happened in here. This is another one that a lot of people probably aren't going to enjoy the ending. I don't know. I think the ending is pretty good. There's a couple of different ways you can read this book. This can definitely just be that super fun popcorn read where you don't really think about too much and you just kind of blow through it and you're like, ooh, it's scary, fun, good time. And then this is also a story where you can really sit and dissect a lot of things and be like, wait, does this mean that? Is this the secret message? Like there's all kinds of layers and stuff that you can really dive into and get into. And it's just a whole lot of fun. It's one of those series that, or not series, one of those books that I think maybe just hit me at the right time. I kind of needed something that was a little bit more like this. But man, I absolutely love this book. I had such a fun time with it. It was so great. It was one of the few books that as soon as I finished it, I wanted to reread it immediately. I didn't because I don't really reread books, but I honestly don't know the last time that happened where I finished something and I immediately wanted to reread it. Honestly, it might have been when I finished The Wheel of Time and I was like, wow, I finished Memory of Light. I kind of want to just start Eye of the World again. I had a similar feeling here. Thankfully, it was a single book, but I kind of wanted to just start it over right away because I had just such a good time with it. And the basic premise of this one is basically a family comes and knocks at somebody's door and says, hey, this is my childhood home. Would you mind if we come in and look around for memory's sake? And that is kind of where the story escalates to. I feel like this is one of those stories where that's all you should hear. Don't try to look up this book. Don't read a bunch of synopsises. Don't read a bunch of reviews. Just go in, experience the story pretty blind. I think it is more enjoyable that way. And so, yeah, absolutely love that book. And so now for my favorite book so far of the year, and this is probably going to be a hard one to dethrone. I've talked about it quite a bit here. I have a review for it on the channel, all this stuff, but that is Demon Copperhead. And man, this book, emotionally devastating. I've used that phrase quite a few times here in this videos. There's something about books that if they can affect me on an emotional level, they really stick with me. But this is really just a story that tackles so many important issues, does it in a way that, like, I can't say that this book is enjoyable, right? But I loved this book, but it's a hard book to read, like horrible things happen just over and over and over and over and over again. And I have looked at some reviews and to see why people don't like this book, because this is like a 4.5 on Goodreads. Like most people are with me and love this book. So I'm always curious. I'm like, what are the negative emotions surrounding a book? And it was basically like, for some people, it felt like it was maybe pandering, or it was like it was so down in the muck that it was unrealistic. And for me, it was more of it's not that this is unrealistic. This is just like that dirty place that we don't like to look and we don't like to acknowledge and we don't like to see as real. And unfortunately it is. Like, people are dealing with these things. These aren't made up things. Like, there are people's whose lives that they never even got a fair shake because of the circumstances they were born into. And then their lives were destroyed by people abusing systems to make money. And there's all kinds of things and social commentary that happens in this book, which I understand is not always the most fun thing to read. But this, once again, is just one of those powerful books that I think, even if you come away with it, maybe not loving it the way I did, I think it's hard to say that it doesn't at least try to bring some of these issues to light and just highlight some of the things that are happening in communities that were exploited for multiple reasons and in multiple ways, and just maybe never had as fair as a shake as some other people would. So that is my top 10 books of the year so far. I would love to know what yours are down below in the comments, or you can always message me on the Discord as always. But that's all for me. And remember, read what you want when you want.